Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. First off, I want to thank you for coming during day 2, after lunch, or instead of lunch, to learn something new. I hope that in this bright spring day, we won't get bored here. So, without further ado, let's get to the substance, and let's start with an introduction. This is the QR code, which I understand contains a link to the Positive Technologies Development Telegram channel. I'm also part of it, and sometimes we publish memes there, so you're welcome to join, because if not us, then who will drive the industry? Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm very happy to see a lot of people I know, and to remember that some of you I've seen during the previous PH days, and some I've seen just last week or a couple of days ago. Okay, without further ado, I'll talk about such peculiar topic, which is how to apply zero trust in DevSecOps. This is not a very popular topic. I haven't been able to find a lot of research or articles on it, so I guess I'll just be the pioneer of it. And I thought maybe it's because I like the word zero trust, and maybe I like the word DevSecOps, so why don't I put them together? And I decided to talk about it. I'm still with Swordfish Security, and I'm responsible for audit, security, consulting, in safe and secure development. So I can see you guys from Swordfish here. Thank you for coming. And what I want to say is that we always have a few vacancies. All of them are very cool and interesting. You're welcome to come. Please come and join us. We're open to people. We're open to talent. Always happy. If you want, I can share the Telegram channel with you. Okay, I'll share our contacts. Okay, I'm still doing the same. I develop various strategies of security development. I try to do poor things better and better things exceptional. I teach a security course in what is now Swordfish Academy. So if you need to teach somebody your OPSEC, your DevOps, you're welcome. I'll share my contact, so you can just go to our website. And now let's talk about what brings us here today. I'm doing good in terms of timing. So I guess you can read this and let me explain this in plain language. I keep hearing increasingly often ideas and presentations about let's do DevSecOps in a whatever happens fashion. And the past couple of years shows us that this is not enough. We don't want to be doing DevSecOps so that we had SAST with some strange name, not integrated, etc. So some minimal DevSecOps doesn't work. The cyber environment is such, the situation in the markets and in the world is such that we want to secure everything point to point, end to end. The whole life cycle, we have to have it covered. And here's what we'll talk about. I'll talk a little bit about Zero Trust and its main principles. I think most of you know about it, and maybe some of you read those Zero Trust architecture documents and forgot it already, like myself. And we'll talk about what is integrated into what. Zero Trust into DevSecOps or vice versa. We'll talk about what happens with the development process, and I guess a couple of life hacks about when DevSecOps ends, and spoiler, that's when we toss all the servers that have everything up and running. Okay, what is Zero Trust in very simple terms? I guess you've seen all those huge mind maps, but I formulated this in these 5 sentences. We've got to know who has access to data. We've got to know to which data. anyone has access. We've got to understand what else has access to data, such as APIs, services, applications, etc. We've got to understand from where they have access and what is the link between components. So I guess the zero trust is that we want to cover with our security, and we want to have good answers to all these questions. The key principles are that we have to confirm everything. We need to ensure connection security, guarantee authentication before we put anything up on the screen. But what I will focus on most in my presentation is that we've got to organize some sort of monitoring at all stages. We've got to understand all and any activity that is happening with our apps. And this is a big issue in the markets. I can see that some of the components are underestimated in terms of monitoring. And the next thing I want to talk about is that for me, zero trust, maybe from a previous life, is something about when you don't know what to do exactly, but you want to have everything secure. And I guess here it's pretty much the same. There are some ideas, there are some concepts, and we want to do something very well. Talking about DevSecOps, I don't think that in the 50 minutes of my presentation I will be able to give you a guideline of how we can make everything secure. But if I'm able to convey some useful thoughts to you, that would be useful. After all, that is the purpose of my being here. Let's go back to DevSecOps a little bit. This 8-shaped figure, I guess, has been seen by everybody. It evolves somewhat, some gets added, some gets removed. But the key thing that I want to pay attention to that is overlooked by many, I know that there's a lot of buzz about that SEC is a continuous shell around it, but the checks should be continuous, not discrete. So SAST and DAST should cover several cycles of development and so forth. And this is what you need to keep in mind when I'll start talking about how it fits with zero trust. So it's more about continuity of checks and inspections. DevSecOps, by the way, also has some key principles. And previously, it was said that DevSecOps rests at 3 principles. Those are people, processes, and people. I would tune it up somewhat and say that we've got to have tools for continuous security testing. Again, not points in a cycle, but it should be continuous. We should have the ability to automate processes, not just do checks when we fancy it, not to look at the technical depth where we fancy it, but it should be automated. And finally, we've got to have expertise. If we don't have a person or people who know what to do, neither processes nor tools would function well. And going back to my premise, essentially, we don't have a choice of whether we want to do DevSecOps or not. It's either we do it well or we do it just somehow. And the point is that vulnerabilities are growing in number, and maybe as we speak, some other exploits are being created. But we can choose between doing something to have some coverage and doing something well. And funnily enough, doing well doesn't mean that it's expensive or it's long to implement or it's to overload your people or it's to kill your time to market. It's a totally different thing. It's about doing what we can then roll out. It's not doing something that we wouldn't be able to roll out. So why not? So why don't we bring together something that is about safety, security, architecture, trust, that has some legislative base underpinning it, maybe not in Russia but elsewhere, and to overlay it with DevOps, which we have been used to for a couple of decades. And if previously that cycle, that horizontal 8 was decomposed into checks, that would use something like that. Then we get the code and we get the opportunity to scan this code. And we can deploy an app and dynamically test it. We can look at how it operates in containers, and we can check whether it's all good in terms of the components, that we have all the right libraries, we don't have any wrong libraries, that it works well under the hood. And in the classic cycle, that's it culminates in a pen test or maybe fuzz test or security test. But often I can see that at this point the OPSEC guys just ends their work and submits the product to operations. But I guess that's not a good approach. We as DevSecOps must continue monitoring our app. We don't allow other people or other team have the responsibility for it. We are responsible that we sent it to production and that it would exist like that in production. And if we go to before development, it's also quite interesting here. I hope that I don't step off the stage. And before development, you want to do something that any framework, any standards, any article on Haber talks about. We need requirements. Until we understand what requirements we have for our app, we can't do anything. And especially given that there are silos, DevOps is one silo, security is another silo, etc. And of course, OPSEC would do something. They would set quality gates. But if we don't have the support of compliance risks and everybody else, there is no guarantee that those quality gates would be in the right place, first and foremost. So it's important that these requirements involved everybody, involve the developers who understand the business needs of the app and can ensure this 5 nines availability or whatever availability is required. Access control, and this is also something that I see a lot. Say MDM, mobile device management, that sometimes comes to the fore, then it goes into the background. One thing that I want you to remember is how your developers deploy. I still often see when they just connect over HTTP or over FTP. We would want, of course, to see a different process. Next, minimal privileges principle. And I once looked at a product, Avast antivirus, a certain part of it, CE/CD. But I guess the ranking could have been better if we were to find good answers to the questions: what is allowed for DevOps, what is allowed for developers, what access does the app have that wants to connect to us. It's funny that everyone knows that by default there's maximum privilege, but it's up to you to check. Often the absence of mapping of rights leads to very bad outcomes. And CI/CD OWASP, you can check it out yourselves. You can check out what others wrote. The next component is segmentation. And by that, I mean segmentation of network, segmentation of access, and segmentation of which data goes where. The situation that test data in and prod data in prod is something that should be known by anyone. But then it turns out that people had more privileges than they should, and test data would migrate to prod stands, and people could operate it without even knowing it. A few words about each of these boxes. Requirement development, requirement design. Here, I wanted to lay out the things that must be there by all means. And some of it is from the experience of my company. Other things are from my previous experience, yet others are from our framework, etc. Risk and threat modeling is something that often gets overlooked. It's a big pain for me when I ask people, do you do that? People say yes, and they show what they have, their materials, and they show some cool things. And you ask them, oh, this is great, you must have spent a lot of time on it, because this is not a template. It's a good document that fits with mitigation measures, etc. And I ask them, okay, when did you develop that? And they tell me, a couple of years after we launched the app. So the question that hangs in the air is why. Of course, it's better than not to have anything, but if it were implemented before we even started development, we might have avoided something. We might have avoided spending money on patching, might have avoided spending time and resources writing rules on the firewall to block something. Have we done it where it should have been done before any work began, which is how it should be. Next is determining requirements to components and architecture. And you've got to talk to people from security in architecture. If you don't have them, talk to a consultant. If you don't have access to even that, then use your own reasoning. Before the app is there, we've got to understand what can be done, what cannot be done, what can be brought over, what cannot be brought over. In terms of component requirements, can we bring over a library whose license does not allow it to be used in commercial projects? I don't remember quite a lot of cases where that led to issues, but you've got to understand that currently there is some the situation is getting stricter, so it might be possible when you have an app with a library that is not supposed to be used for commercial purposes. And the next one is that we want to understand from a security point of view. Doesn't the terms of reference include something that contradicts common sense? That say, if you do a password change, the new password is being sent to your email in an unencrypted fashion. And the next one is an idea from Zero Trust, is a mandatory approve. Everything, even minor changes, has to be approved by OPSEC. It's not that we've got to test everything now. Killing time to market and having a release once every 3 years. But as someone who's responsible for the security of the app, you've got to have an opportunity to okay everything, that's any initiative. In this way, you would mitigate your risks, you would know what you would have to work with going forward. And the final point is data categorization. And I want to dwell a little bit on this as well. It's not the classic recommendation about think what is in your database and think of your databases you have. DevSecOps, after all, is about common sense, and Zero Trust is pretty much about the same. We've got, first of all, to protect the apps and resources that are the most critical. I have a favorite description that an app such as a DBO should certainly be protected more than the app that's an internal messenger that employees use to exchange cat pics. We've got to focus on what's important, not on something random. Next one is access control, and I mentioned that initially. We want to check who connects from where, why the hell, what they want, and we don't show them anything, even as a preview. We don't show them anything at all until we validate and verify the access. They shouldn't be given any objects, any entities. This sounds like a reasonable thing, but a lot of attacks and exploits happen because of this principle being violated. You can read in the literature and really be surprised. Next is the session time. Seemingly, this is something that everyone knows about, but for some reason don't always take into account. And it might be a situation when someone logs in and just stays there indefinitely. There could be a user or an admin, it doesn't matter. We want to restrict the session time with some reasonable time. It is up to you to choose the time, given best practices and common sense, etc. Next is MDM, deploying through FTP to prod. Don't do that. If you do that, then honestly, the purpose of SAST it defeats the purpose. Next, behavior assessment and identification. If someone gets into an app, what they do there, at what time they get into the app, for how long is their session, and then to monitor this data and to assess the overall security. Next, it's to identify endpoints. Where do people come from in terms of users? We want to have a general understanding of where they come from. I'm not talking about restricting access to only Russian IPs, not that at all. But understanding the overall picture and overall behavior is something that is recommended. And of course, updating the list of accesses. If your developer goes away, please turn off their access. If your DevOps goes away, please turn off their access. And ideally, going back to DevSecOps, that should happen automatically, not in a way that, okay, they hand in their swipe card and in 3 months' time you close their access. Is that a bad story? Yes. Does it exist? Sadly, yes. And finally, the minimal privilege principle. It's for a reason that certain of us blogs were ranking in the top, because this principle of privileges was not observed. And I know that you understand that there is an issue with automation, that you set up an account and for some reason it has very broad privileges. But we've got to know about it, and we've got to be able to change the privileges in due time. We want to disable the privileges that people won't use simply because of the nature of their job. So we don't want to show them a loophole that they potentially have in their accounts, in their profile. You want to monitor that automatically. You want to approve whatever happens with the profiles during the OPSEC. And of course, to be prepared to support DevSecOps as a flexible methodology to change things if you need. If a person changes a position, changes job, and they need new privileges, you are free to review them. If that is needed for them being able to do their job. If you think that is needed, and if you get arguments that that is needed, and Next is segmentation. We've got to understand where things come from, and it is as if there are three roles in an app: an admin, a user, and a developer. And OPSEC approves that, and it turns out that they have the same access, just different names. Well, it shouldn't be like that. It's also about deeper understanding of what's going on. But I can see that increasingly often that becomes the responsibility of OPSECs and DevSecOps. Account rights segregation, stage segregation, these are golden rules in prod. Okay, now on monitoring. I once made a joke that we had this shift left trend, then we had the shift everywhere trend. So while we were shifting left, we should have been shifting right. And by ensuring excellent DevSecOps, you ask someone, and what about monitoring? Do you do logging? And they say no. You ask another person, do you do logging? And they say nope. You go to the third one and ask, do you log, mate? And they tell you, yeah, but we're sort of not responsible for it. And so this story about logs is quite an old one. And you could say that it's not about OPSECs, it's not about DevSecOps, it's to the operations guys. But it's us who would need the logs to avoid mistakes in subsequent releases, to reuse the experience and just simply put, if there's an incident or if there's a suspicion of an incident, to go back and see what was going on. The login story is quite an interesting one. I would recommend to approach this from two sides. DevSecOps is about common sense, and it's a good thing to implement, way to implement common sense. You can do two types of logs. One simplified log, and the second one with more detailed log, with IPs and access rights changes, and you could keep them together. That wouldn't disrupt comfortable operation of your apps, because you would just be able to go to the one that you need. But if you have an issue, that would that could save you. And it's not about a particular tool or behavior analysis when we write rules about how users should behave. Let's first understand what to expect from them. Because, okay, we don't expect users to log in at night, but what if a person is in a different time zone? First, we need to understand it. It's about having some quantitative parameters without any metrics. I guess it should be first we measure and then we use. And this could be linked with CM, and I guess SOC SOC would thank you for this. And I was even approached by SOC and asking me, let's be doing DevSecOps. We want to have everything in CM. And the same goes for monitoring. And I guess what is important here is monitoring of active vulnerabilities. They will always be there. Let's just acknowledge it. We can't eliminate everything. So the ideology that we only eliminate the high importance and critical vulnerabilities seems like a good philosophy. So we've got to understand what we have based on scanning, based on other tools, and we've got to work with that as experts who ensure security of apps and the development cycle. And of course, firewalling, protection from DOS or botnet. Maybe we won't be responsible for the whole classic OPSEC toolkit, but we've got to know how to ensure that even if it's ensured by somewhere else, in operations, in DevOps, etc., we've got to think about it. So if we convert this horizontal 8 into a mind map, you would see this spider with 8 legs.
I suspect that you wouldn't be able to read it, but those presentations will be published and you will read them. I tried to put here the concepts of what we actually need at each stage. If we talk about classical 8 points, then a design would have requirements at input libraries, scanning of the code, check-in, we check something. Then when we try to merge the concepts, we can get something like this. We are not just lose our application and let it go as such. At Operate, at Monitor, you will see a lot of activities, a lot of things to do. Are we doing it now or not? Some people are doing, but not by OPSEC. OPSECs even wouldn't know about that. If those metrics are taken, OPSECs wouldn't even be aware of them, but they should. And also, something I missed before, because it's very difficult to squeeze all that within 1 hour of presentation, security of infrastructure, where your application lives and where our company lives. If it's bad, if it has a lot of holes and backdoors, who can protect you? Then quality gates, also excellent DevSecOps. You don't need it if it doesn't work. I heard that people have tools, the companies have tools, but they don't have alerts. Or even if they have alerts, they don't read them. Or now, Quality Gate says no one is going any further, but clearly, correctly tuned quality gates and alerts are quite necessary, and everyone should know about them. For example, here we have 5 critical wins, here we have 20 high ones. Of course, we are following business, where we try to accelerate time to market, but we must at least know about it. Then security of the build machine. Let us admit that if the machine where you create our builds, if it cannot ensure its own secure state, then anyone can substitute or replace your artifacts. Now, one more thing. This area appeared at the very end where I finished my presentation. We have to define, I thought, who we do not trust. Shall we mistrust everyone at all? So who can do something bad? A developer? Developers? Do we trust them? No. DevSecOps were friendly. Users? Or shall we mistrust everyone? I would give you the following answer. We do not trust the malicious user, whoever he is. So I'm on time. Let me show you the results, the summary. Zero trust as a general concept of security is good if you have the time, if you have the resources and the methodology, and you can implement it all in DevSecOps. And DevSecOps can also be easily implemented in Zero Trust. It's part of Zero Trust. DevSecOps is also built by the people who build processes. Of course, you can get good ideas from Zero Trust and bring in DevSecOps. Yes, it can be done easily. You can improve your DevSecOps as a result. And also, as I said, DevSecOps has no sense if you cannot guarantee the general security. We found something, some vulnerabilities somewhere, it's nothing if we don't know anything else. So we found one thing, eliminated it, dropped it, but new vulnerabilities will pop up. So logging, monitoring, hardening, that's what we should do all the time. So do not waste efforts on DevSecOps if you cannot guarantee general security. This is the general idea. If we don't secure users' data, information, so DevSecOps wouldn't work. Security cannot work with DevOps. You cannot use DevSecOps without the general security. At this point, I would like to stop my main speech, my main presentation. You have my address, my whereabouts. You can praise me or criticize me, bring in new ideas because it's an interesting subject, DevSecOps 2.0. Let's join efforts, let's improve. And there are a lot of links from Swordfish. I recommend to go there, to subscribe, to stay, likes, comments, reposts. That seems to be all. Thank you. Thank you very much for staying. I see that people want to ask their questions. So please pass on the microphone. And this is a classical slide. If you like everything, please evaluate the presentation and it will be good for me. Hi. An interesting presentation indeed. And the question is, in the first part, you said that we tuned all the secure flow and then you shouldn't just pass it on somewhere and say that everything is all right. But is it not the same in the monitoring, in the logging system? We say, please do logs, and then during the incident, someone forgot to log in there, the other logged and deleted the log. So monitoring was on your right, but it should also be in the box. So it's for the security people, not for the developers. Yes, it was on the right because from the ideology point of view, monitoring starts when we already have the application. What you said is ideal. It's our common headache. I don't want to take all the monitoring to me. We need a huge development for monitoring. No. If in if you are responsible for some application, it's your job how to log it, and it would be better for you to provide recommendations, what to write down, when, where to store them, how to delete them, all that. Then again, we must standardize and describe everything, how to log in application. Yes, at the level of requirements, when we develop requirements to the applications. Yes, thank you for a very interesting presentation. And this is my question. You have a lot of experience, I'm sure of that, in which components and endpoints of the application, according to statistics, you see violations of zero trust. Well, what an interesting question. Implants first. When we talk that we have to control where the developers bring in that code, let me skip the story about the library on a memory stick. But sometimes there is no control where, who logged in and deployed a certain code because we cannot control where a person came from. We don't have control of mobile devices. We do not control them. Then components. I think it's about the same story. The same as with vulnerabilities. For example, bringing in libraries, no control over what we bring, or maybe the license is wrong, and then lawyers will punish us. But if the library contains vulnerability, the result would be even worse. So these are the two main things. Thank you. Hi, thank you. I have one question and a half. There is a practice, separate development zone, trusted development environment. Yes. And there, the developers have more rights to facilitate development. Then, when we recall zero trust, of course, shall we do that as well? So, then half of the question, there is a concept of a common build. So we coded, we built, checked, and then it goes according to landscape the way we like. Can we support that in zero trust? Because we have to trust something, not to check and recheck every time. So when we have a certain internal trusted environment inside the company, it covers a certain block of zero trust. We know what is happening there, and you, as a representative of secure development, are responsible for that. Part of the headache is there. Okay, it's not yours. Just look at what kind of blocks are covered by it. As for the 0.5 or 0.75 of your question, actually, freely wandering artifacts are quite dubious. If you are responsible and if you can guarantee 100% that nothing is going to happen there, then perhaps you can do that. Unfortunately, I have no experience in that area. I cannot say that it is good or bad. But, however, if I did it myself, I would check and recheck it every time. If I signed an artifact and if I see it somewhere, I have to check that it is really this. So you have to check your signature. Yes, that's right. Okay. That's my vision. I don't know whether it coincides with yours. Thank you. Thank you for an interesting presentation. How, in practice, do you move to DevSecOps? Today is ODD, deploy. OPSEC comes and says, we start zero trust. Where is the resistance and how to... Resistance is everywhere. If you go and say like that, so all the developers will go to an interesting bank who will take them. If I talk about zero trust implementation, it doesn't happen at once. We cannot force developers, we cannot beat them, and we cannot beat ourselves. It happens gradually, step by step. Let's try this, let's try to do that. It's a good option. It's the most useful action through going through good, friendly agreements with developers. And developers realize that they will come to us anytime. Let them come first. It's much better than production would come and say, rewrite everything from scratch. Zero trust, DevSecOps, security may come to you from top, from a regulator, from business. This is a bad option, because then You will have to go to development and say there is no choice. Perhaps you will leave the company, but we shall try to hire other people. It's a bad option. Don't do that. Try to be friendly. May work with companies through corporate culture by implementing processes, DOP, agile modules. Through culture, yes, because when I say let's be friendly, this is part of the culture, the corporate culture. If a person understands the value of his contribution to security, this is good. And not additional agile modules or planning for the sake of planning, efficiency for the sake of efficiency, but just human, simple meetups when no one forces anyone, when developers are friendly and security is friendly, and it helps boost security because you are stopped assuming as bad people who cut all the ways and prevent us all the time. Hi. This is the life situation. Our company takes part in development of products. We have a company which develops cloud for us, contractor. Well, it's in our company we also do part of the job, and there is a gap between demilitarized zone and the cloud. The question is CI/CD is broken, and what kind of recipe can you recommend? How can we control what happens with the cloud if everything is developed, if all DevSecOps tools are in the DMZ? Can we control that remotely, apart from placing scanners there or making builds in DMZ? So it's a hard question because we're talking about cloud security, but let me try to improvise. First of all, this story of contractors who develop something for you. This is a hole. This is a gap. What do we recommend? First, the simplest thing, and oblige that company. It should commit. It should check by all means. If it gives something to us, they should have checked it beforehand by the tools that you accepted. Then you also take source code from them, right? Yes. Then please organize scanning in DMZ. That's what we do. But there is no guarantee. We cannot stop a CI/CD in the cloud. Yes, it's a cloud feature. So it needs a deeper process. I cannot tell you anything else. It's hard. Yes, I see you now. Please tell me, how can we, what is easier to get DevSecOps? Shall we teach a security person programming, or shall we teach programmer security methods? Well, I like this question. Before the presentation was how to build DevSecOps. It takes 25 minutes, and I'm talking about our approach that we promote among our customers. Where can we get access? Just a moment, please. This is a link, and we have a channel there. In the channel, there is a link to the presentation, to video, to everything. I talk in very simple ways with some memes. In any case, you can get access. Now, back to what I can say within the remaining 30 seconds. If you don't have DevSecOps at all, please don't start with the fact that you are going to grow it up from someone. Please take pains and find one in the market and let him train more people, raising their competences, looking for people who can do it. So you need a mentor, you need a knowledgeable person. DevSecOps want to grow, and you can take a person, a middle competent person, and he will boost his competence, and he will boost the competence of our employees, or use Swordfish Academy courses. I have to tell you about it. Next question on your left. Thank you for an interesting presentation. I had an excellent checklist. I will save it. I have a more difficult case. When we have huge mixed teams with a lot of developers, with historically fixed procedures, and we want to improve it to make DevSecOps. If we have a new team, we can start everything from scratch in the right way. But we have teams that work for years, for decades even. And of course, we can take some components, we can take some modules, but the rest is already running. In this situation, of course, we want to spread DevSecOps everywhere, but in well-established teams, the process will go on slowly. So, what can you recommend? Is it a good approach to use the adapters, early adapters, demonstrate how well they work, so for the established teams to start developing faster? So you have very experienced teams, developers, and they will go slowly. They will go in the different direction. They have 20 years of experience in development. They don't need anything on top of that. To avoid that, let me tell you the way we do it. In any case, all the teams are different. One started earlier, the other started later, the third doesn't want to start at all. Human psychology is such that some people run fast, others run slow. So take applications where you badly need DevOps, then use it there. So, and start to choose the teams where you can start from scratch in the right way. If you have a new team, create DevSecOps in the best possible way. If they work well within 2 weeks, months, or a year, at least a year, then you can scale up. DevSecOps reduces the time to market. It's bad DevSecOps. Good DevSecOps reduces it by 3 months, and then it goes up and accelerates. And we see that those companies have better product, user experience is excellent, and time to market is not bad. So start from where you can achieve success. Some people use some crazy language which only 3 persons use in the country. So use your situation the way you know. How can I explain to the top management why we invested in DevSecOps? So we already have security department, everything is secure. Why DevSecOps? It's very difficult to explain to top management. That's right. Well, if it touches the budget, you have to struggle with financial department for each ruble. Well, perhaps you have to offer something which they understand, calculation of efficiency, cost efficiency, and try to use the people who are ready to talk to them in their own language to substantiate your ideas. DevSecOps? ROI, return of investment. Yes, we calculated ROI with DevSecOps. It's our basic portfolio of services. We have a person who does it. What about DevSecOps ROI? Time to market will be accelerated, or shall we demonstrate acceleration, or shall we demonstrate that otherwise we shall lose competition? No, not that one. We have wages, average time of fixing bugs. There are metrics and there are tools that measure them, and we have a hub which knows how long does it take to fix the bug in a certain environment, and we can calculate for them how much will it cost for them to fix, not to delay until a later period. Well, that's it.